A few things that I love about the culture, like I mentioned before, Dominicans are very generous and always willing to give, and that's kind of one thing that they're known for. They'd always be willing to take off the shirt that they're wearing on their back and give it to you if you're in need. I always loved the Dominicans and how generous they were towards us missionaries. One cool thing that I like about the culture in the Dominican Republic is that everyone there believes in God, which really helps out with missionary work. In fact, if you ask someone if they are religious, they almost take it as an offense because everyone there is religious, and the biggest religion there is Catholic, as with the majority of Latin America. But everyone there believes in God, which makes missionary work a little bit more easy. You're able to connect with people on that basis, and you always have a building block to start off with, which is really nice. A few things about the history of the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic has a lot of cool sites that you can go to. One of the coolest that a lot of missionaries would go to, especially in the East Mission, was called the Conde, and it's in the capital, and it has a lot of old buildings and things like that. And it actually has a building that's said to be one of the houses of Christopher Columbus, which is a cool fact. A lot of people don't know, but that he came to the Dominican Republic, and there is a house there that is said to be the house of Christopher Columbus. And it's a cool little area right there in the Conde where you can find that house, and a lot of people visit there as a tourist attraction, and a lot of missionaries go there as P-Day. It's a pretty fun place.
Part of their culture, they love dancing, they love their music, and every time there's music, they're always dancing. And it's not just like the usual, dancing here. It's with a partner. It's salsa, it's bachata, merengue, a really cool Latin American style of dance in that, in Central America, all around. And what they love is they love just having fun. They're just all about having fun, talking with people, being really friendly, open, and they just love, they just love having tons of friends. And they just love having fun. That's the culture.
One of the things about the culture there is that it's an islander lifestyle, pretty laid back. I feel like a lot of what happens there is described by the phrase "si Dios quiere," God willing. If somebody tells you "si Dios quiere" after you invite them to do something, it can mean one of three things, depending on their facial expression, depending on your relationship with that person already, and depending on past experience with them. It can mean, no, I'm not going to do it, but I'm saying God willing just to be nice. Or I'll do it if God tells me to, but then they don't look for any way for the Lord to tell them to. Or, yes, I will actually do it unless something gets in my way. It's one of the things that irks me about the culture, but I think it can be overlooked for sure. I love the Dominican culture, and I love the Dominican people. They're so loving and friendly. You can meet any Dominican out there, pretty much. And they will receive you into their house, and they'll give you fruit juice, and they'll ask if you want some food, and ask if you want water if it's a hot day, and will be all over you. And you can become instant friends with anyone. You don't even really have to try. It's amazing. Also, because it's an islander lifestyle, very much tardiness is definitely a bit of an issue at times. If you announce that a ward activity is going to start at 7, you can guarantee that the bishopric will probably be there at about 8, and then the rest of the ward will show up at 9. One of the interesting things about the Dominican Republic, as far as culture goes, is its history. The Dominican Republic was originally a part of France, a part of Haiti, but Dominicans gathered together and fought off the yoke of France and freed themselves under the leadership of the three fathers of their country, Sanchez, Mella, and Duarte. And there were a couple of interesting battles in that process. One of which, there's a city called Asua in the West Mission that they call everyone there tirapiedras, stone throwers, because during one of the revolutionary battles, the people of Asua didn't have any weapons of any kind. They had rocks. And there was the army with guns and bayonets and cannons, and the people of Asua won the battle by throwing rocks. I mean, that's incredible. And so they have their own holiday there in Asua celebrating the battle of the Tirapiedras. But the interesting thing is that so everything's over, they've won the revolution, they've got their own country. Their first president's name is General Pedro Santana. He's not a very renowned name in the Dominican Republic because after a few years of presidency, he decided things weren't going well and made a deal with Spain, where he left the country, sold the country to Spain, and then hid out somewhere else in the world so that nobody could find him and lived with all his riches and all that stuff. And so the Dominican Republic had to fight a second time for their independence. It is ridiculous. But they won it again. And so they have another holiday. Apart from their Independence Day, they have Restoration Day, which is the day that they restored their independence after having lost it.
I love the Dominican people. And not just because I, served a mission there. Dominican people are just genuinely kind, and they'll come up to you and they want to have a conversation and they want to ask you about anything and everything. They often don't hold back. The people that I met on my mission were just so kind. The culture is so different than the culture that I grew up in. I would like to say that I grew up in a very caring and loving culture, a culture that's willing to share, and they do. But the Dominicans have learned how to do it in a different way. And I just remember at a general conference once, the members had come from all over and they had spent all of the money they had to get to this conference. And I had a granola bar and they were here all day. And it was like loaves and fishes almost. I handed the granola bar to just one little boy that we had been working with his family. And I expected him to open it like one of my nieces or nephews and just devour it and have the other children say, "Hey, I want some," and them just kind of hurry and get it down before anyone else could get to it. But the little boy opened it carefully and he cut it into pieces. There were 5 kids and every kid got a piece. And his mother didn't ask him to do it. I didn't say anything. He just did it. He just knew that there were other people and that they needed to eat too. Dominicans they're humble. They're teachable. And in that they're just so easy to love. But they like to party for sure. It seemed like every night was a party in the Dominican Republic. And their doors are always open. When I got to the airport, when I arrived in the Dominican Republic, there were 2 walls that were kind of painted a bright color, so they drew your eye to them. And on them, on one wall was written in Spanish, the same phrase that was written on the other wall in English. And the phrase was, "The Dominican Republic opens its doors to you." And I thought, oh, that's great. I'm a missionary and I got my picture by it. But I didn't realize that statement really was so incredibly true. All throughout the Dominican Republic, everywhere I went, the doors were always open. I mean, it was rare to have to knock on a door. You had to knock on their house. You had to just kind of yell in the doorway because their doors were always open. Anyone and everyone pretty much was welcome, and they were willing to talk with you almost all the time. Didn't necessarily mean they wanted to accept what we had to offer or share with them, but they would let you in. They would sit and talk with you on the street, and at night, like I said, it was a party. The doors were all open, and if there was light, because the power came and went frequently, when there wasn't light, it was kind of somber. But when there was electricity, man, they just came to life, and they were all about having fun. They were just very fun people.
I love Dominicans. They are loud and and there's not really personal space with it, which is, I like some of the other culture that neighbors and stuff, like everyone, you're basically, if you're neighbors, your family, you go into each other's houses and just like, you're like, oh, okay. But they're very loud, they're very blunt, which takes, Americans were kind of more conserved, I feel like. But I just remember, because we just talked about food, I like the Dominican food. And I remember a few times the Dominicans, they'd just be like, oh, do you like the Dominican food? I'm like, yeah, I do. They're like, oh, it looks like it. And I'm like, oh, thanks. Like, or like, oh, you're getting a little fatter. And I'm like, dang it. Like, I'm glad you're telling me that so I, can fix it. But they're just no shame. Which sometimes I feel like I need to be careful because now I kind of picked up on it. I'm like, I don't know, more blunt. But I kind of like it because they're like, there's no holding back. Like I said, they're loud, so they always have loud music. It's not really quiet in a Dominican community unless you live out in like El Campo, which is like the countryside. So, I love that they love you, like very hospitable, and they just want to share everything with you, which was kind of hard as a missionary. Like, we kind of had a rule to not really eat with members because a lot of people were poor. I remember I was in training, and there's a phrase there that they use there called, like, if you're eating and someone comes by, you say bien tiempo, which means like, do you want any? Which really, it literally translates to good time. And I was confused. I was like, well, I don't understand. Like, my trainer was like, he's asking if you want any. And I'm like, oh no. Like, he just had just a thing of rice. I was all he was eating because they didn't really have anything else. And so they're willing to share with anyone if they can, even if they don't have much, which I really love that. Because they don't really have much there, but they learn to live with a lot less, I feel like. And they're happy and loving, and I think that's great. So I love them. It's not particularly all Catholic. They're all very religious, or say that they are. Like, everyone, it is a believing country, which I think is really cool. Like, even in the flag itself, it has an open Bible on it, which I think is really neat. Almost everyone is a believer in God, at least in Christ. They all have kind of that background. It's kind of in their schooling, I feel like, too, that like they kind of openly talk about it more. It's not necessarily, closed, personal thing. Everyone kind of believes in God. For that reason, there are a lot of churches. It's not just Catholic. Like, I remember one of my areas, we lived in front of a Seventh-day Adventist church, and down the street was a Pentecostal church, and right next to that church was our church. So there's Catholic churches, there's a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, there's a lot of Seventh-day Adventist church, Pentecostal churches, just a lot of Methodist. I think there's Methodist. There's Nazarene. There's so many beliefs there because they're just so believing, which I think is really awesome that they have that background and that they're openly talk about it, which I think is cool.